The story begins in a quiet small town, where Paul and Meg are introduced during a school football game. Paul has a crush on Meg and decides to ask her out on a date, and she eventually accepts. At the same time, we are introduced to Brian Flagg, a rebellious young man who draws attention by performing a dangerous motorcycle stunt. Meanwhile, Sheriff Herb Geller goes through his routine without imagining the chaos that is about to begin. Later, an old homeless man sees a mysterious meteor crossing the sky and crashing near the forest. Curious, he decides to investigate the site along with his dog, but the animal starts acting strangely, senses something wrong, and runs away in fear. As the man approaches the object, he ends up touching a gelatinous substance that sticks to his hand and slowly begins consuming his body. After that, Brian notices his motorcycle is broken and goes to the garage where he works to get some tools. Later that night, he returns to fix the bike when he hears noises coming from the woods and becomes alert. At that moment, the homeless man tries to amputate his contaminated arm, but something prevents him. Brian attempts to hold him back and notices the strange slime moving on his arm. The man then flees in desperation, with Brian chasing after him. Shortly afterward, the man is run over by Paul, who was on his way to his date with Meg. Paul gets out of the car to check on the man, while Brian Flagg arrives at the scene soon after. Brian asks what happened, but Paul defends himself by saying the old man appeared out of nowhere and seemed to be running from him. Meg then suggests taking him to the hospital, and the two agree, but Brian warns them about the strange corrosive slime on the man's hand. As they help the homeless man into the car, he starts muttering that something fell from the sky. Paul becomes confused without understanding what he means, but Meg asks him to ignore it, believing the old man is simply in shock. Shortly afterward, Paul notices Brian is leaving and decides to stop him. He says Brian needs to stay to explain everything to the sheriff, and the young man reluctantly agrees. They arrive at the hospital and ask for help for the homeless man, but the nurse initially ignores the teenagers. Brian becomes irritated by the situation, though Paul asks him to stay calm and insists they call a doctor. The nurse then gives attention to the group and explains that the doctor is busy in surgery, but sends the man to an examination room. While they wait, Brian tries to calm the old man, saying everything will be fine. Meg notices the young man's attitude and begins seeing him differently. Shortly afterward, Brian tries to leave, but Paul asks where he thinks he is going. Brian replies that he has already done his part and says they know where to find him. Later, Meg and Paul remain at the hospital waiting for information about the homeless man's condition. While getting a drink for Meg, Paul walks past the examination room and notices the man's body moving slightly. Frightened, he looks closer and sees the man reacting strangely, with his eyes completely open, which scares him. He immediately calls the doctor to check on a possible seizure. When they arrive, the doctor confirms the man no longer has vital signs, and upon removing the sheet, they discover that the body has been partially corroded by an unknown acid, making it clear that this was not a normal death. Shocked, Paul runs to a telephone to call the sheriff and report what happened. During the conversation, the sheriff asks questions about the location and who is with him, and upon hearing the names involved, immediately becomes suspicious, especially regarding Brian, already treating him as the main suspect in the situation. While still on the phone, Paul fails to notice that the creature is hiding on the ceiling above him. In a sudden movement, it attacks him and knocks him down, interrupting the call. Screams echo through the hospital and draw Meg's attention. She runs to the scene and finds Paul being attacked and consumed by the creature. She tries to help him and pull him away, but in doing so, his arm tears off from his body. The scene quickly becomes chaotic and brutal, with the body being destroyed right before her eyes. Meg goes into shock after witnessing everything up close and, unable to handle the situation, eventually faints. Later, Sheriff Herb arrives at the hospital accompanied by his team and tries to understand what happened. Meg, still in shock, reports everything in a confused manner, but they do not believe her story. With no options left, Meg's parents decide to take her home so she can calm down. Meanwhile, the sheriff orders the body to be sent for autopsy and investigation. While organizing the situation, Herb talks to another police officer and reinforces that they need to find the person responsible quickly. However, the conversation changes when the officer informs him that the suspect has already been detained, with Brian arriving in the patrol car. Meg sees him arriving and watches him in surprise before leaving. Brian reacts angrily to being accused without explanation. Meanwhile, Scott, Paul's friend, is near the hospital with his girlfriend Vic. He tries to create a more intimate atmosphere between them, but Vic shows no interest and says she wants to rest. Taking advantage of the moment, Scott goes to the trunk to get more drinks and does not notice a strange movement in the grass behind him. When he returns, he finds Vic still asleep and decides to take advantage of the situation while she is unconscious. At that instant, the creature suddenly manifests, emerging from the girl's body and attacking Scott. He panics and tries to break free, but is quickly overpowered and violently killed, while Vic's body is completely consumed and transformed by the creature into something monstrous. Later, Meg tries to calm herself at home after everything she witnessed at the hospital. She overhears her parents talking about what happened, and her father expresses certainty that Brian is responsible for the crimes. Shortly afterward, Meg's mother goes upstairs to see her and tries to reassure her, asking her to rest and promising that everything will be clearer in the morning. Before leaving, Meg questions whether she truly does not believe what she said, but her mother avoids the subject and only reinforces that the important thing is that she is fine at that moment. Once she is certain everything is calm, Meg escapes through the window, determined to investigate on her own. Meanwhile, inside Scott's car, the creature has already completely transformed into a slimy mass and watches the town. On the other hand, Brian is interrogated by Herb and another police officer about the incident at the hospital, but nobody believes his version of events. Irritated, he asks for a lawyer, which nearly causes a violent argument until the sheriff intervenes. Without evidence against Brian and unable to contact his family, Herb decides to release him despite the other officers' outrage. After being released, Brian leaves the police station and is approached by Meg, who tries to talk to him. He initially ignores her until she steps out of the car and shows him the card, saying she is there to help with the situation. Brian reacts sarcastically, saying things do not work like that and expressing sympathy for Paul. Even so, he ends the conversation by saying he is tired and hungry before walking away toward a diner. Brian sits down at the diner, and while waiting for his order, Meg appears asking for his help. Suspicious, he questions why she came to him now, and Meg explains that nobody believes what she saw. Brian says he only found the homeless man with a strange substance on his hand, but Meg insists that thing killed several people and continues growing throughout the town. After hearing the version she told the police, Brian insinuates that she might be under the influence of substances, leaving Meg hurt after realizing he also does not believe her. She tries to leave, but notices the door is locked. Brian then changes his attitude, apologizes, and tries to calm her down, eventually making her smile while they talk. Meanwhile, the sheriff remains at the police station coordinating his officers, who are conducting searches in one area of town, but they find nothing relevant, and with no results, Herb decides to end the searches for the moment and determines that the investigation will continue in the morning. He shows increasing concern about the situation. The sheriff comments to the secretary that he has never seen so many murders happen in such a short time. She tries to calm him, saying he is doing the best he can and needs to remain calm. At the diner, the waitress notices the sink is clogged and calls a coworker to try to fix the problem. He tries several times but cannot unclog it until he notices something moving inside the pipes. Without looking directly, he places his hand inside to try to grab whatever is stuck. He ends up finding a strange viscous substance. Within seconds, he is violently dragged into the drain by the creature just as his coworker appears at the scene. Desperate, she begins screaming for the young man, drawing the attention of Meg and Brian, who run to help. Brian prevents the waitress from approaching the drain, and the three of them watch in horror as the man is completely consumed. Shortly afterward, the creature moves rapidly through the diner, leaps to the ceiling and attacks them. They flee in panic and are chased throughout the establishment until they manage to hide inside a freezer room. The cold prevents the creature from advancing, and they remain silent while watching it retreat. While trying to escape, the waitress climbs out through a window leading to the alley beside the diner and runs to a public phone to call for help. However, the creature catches up to her and begins enveloping the entire phone booth. Even in desperation, she manages to call the police station and discovers that Sheriff Herb went to the diner. Looking around, she notices the sheriff's remains inside the creature and goes into shock. With no chance of escape, she is eventually consumed by the entity. Inside the freezer room, Brian and Meg cautiously leave their hiding place, trying not to draw attention. Upon leaving, Brian calls out for the waitress, but quickly notices that the diner is devastated, with no sign of her. Amid the destruction, he slips on residue left behind by the creature, immediately putting him on alert. Faced with this, the two decide there is nothing more they can do there and choose to leave in search of help. Meanwhile, Reverend Mark is walking down the street when he hears a sound coming from near the diner. As he approaches to investigate, he notices the creature on the ground, but it quickly descends into the sewer. Frightened by what he saw, he decides to enter the establishment and finds the place completely destroyed. Exploring the environment, he reaches the freezer room and finds traces of the creature spread across the ice. Driven by curiosity, he decides to collect some samples for analysis, even without fully understanding the seriousness of what he is dealing with. Later, Brian and Meg arrive at the police station looking for the sheriff, but discover he left with the other officers for Elkin Woods. Brian immediately realizes that it was the same place where he found the homeless man. Upon arriving at the woods, the two find an abandoned patrol car and signs that the officers left the area in a hurry, deciding to continue on foot through the forest searching for them. During the journey, Meg asks to stop after hearing a strange sound, and Brian also notices the same presence around them. Suddenly, a powerful light invades the area accompanied by an intense gust of wind, and the two begin running in panic. Soon after, helicopters appear flying overhead, while men in biological protection suits enter the area, and frightened Brian and Meg try to escape. But they are surrounded by a group of armed men who prevent them from moving forward. At that moment, a man named Dr. Meadows approaches and states that he came to help them. They are taken to a containment area and begin being questioned by the team. Brian, impatient and suspicious, loses his temper and grabs Meadows, demanding more direct answers about what is happening. The doctor then introduces himself and explains that he is part of a biological containment team responsible for dealing with uncontrolled infectious threats. Meg does not fully understand the situation, and Meadows tries to simplify things by saying they deal with dangerous microscopic organisms. Officer Biggs appears and questions what Brian is doing there, making it clear that the team does not have time for his impulsive behavior. Shortly afterward, Colonel Hargis also arrives, and Meadows states that Biggs is already aware of the plan and that the city containment operation will begin. After Biggs leaves, Meg asks once again what is truly happening. The doctor then reveals that the case is connected to an object that came from space, explaining that it is a meteor. Meg still cannot fully comprehend it, and Meadows begins detailing his theory. He says that long ago dinosaurs dominated Earth, but were suddenly extinguished. Brian questions what that has to do with the current situation, and Meadows states that a meteor carrying a bacterium struck the planet. Brian reacts incredulously and asks whether he truly believes this is a murderous bacterium. Meadows says he already knew about this possibility and had been preparing for this type of event for a long time. Meanwhile, at the movie theater, an employee in the projection booth notices the environment is becoming extremely hot. He questions his coworker about the air conditioning, who claims it is functioning normally, but the feeling that something is wrong persists. While investigating further, the employee is suddenly surprised by the creature and attacked inside the room. Shortly afterward, the coworker arrives and is also killed by the entity without anyone outside noticing, since the sound of the movie playing muffles any screams or movement. The audience continues watching normally, completely unaware of what is happening in the projection booth. Elsewhere, Meadows leads Meg and Brian to a containment area, explaining that everything is temporary because they need to isolate the organism and confirm there is no contamination risk. Brian expresses dissatisfaction and distrust, while the doctor insists it is a necessary and temporary measure. Brian tries to convince Meg to escape with him on his motorcycle, but additional soldiers arrive and order both of them into the transport vehicle. With no way out, they enter the vehicle and are taken away. During the ride, Brian tries to open the door and says he intends to leave the town because he does not trust the situation. Meg tries to calm him down, saying the team is there to help, but he remains unconvinced. He manages to open the door and calls for her to come with him, but she refuses because she wants to find her family. Faced with this, Brian insists one more time, and without changing her mind, he eventually jumps from the moving vehicle. Meanwhile, the agents spread throughout the town begin isolating the residents, gathering everyone into quarantine areas. Meg is taken along as well, but soon reunites with her parents amid the confusion. During the conversation, Meg realizes Kevin is not with them, and they suspect he lied in order to secretly go to the movies with Eben. Desperate, she tries convincing one of the agents to search for the boys immediately, but she is ignored. While her father argues with the man, Meg takes advantage of the distraction to escape. At the movie theater, Kevin watches the movie normally until the creature appears attacking people inside the theater, spreading panic throughout the place. Meg arrives shortly afterward and finds the theater consumed by chaos, with several people being devoured before her eyes. Amid the confusion, she manages to find Kevin and Eddie and tries to get them out before the creature reaches them. During the escape through the hallways, Kevin's clothes become caught in the back exit door, forcing Meg to act quickly to free him before the creature arrives. With the monster practically behind them, Kevin finally breaks free, and the three continue running desperately. Shortly afterward, the group realizes they have entered a dead-end alley. Without wasting time, Meg decides to use the sewer entrance as their only alternative. They descend into the sewer and continue running through the tunnels. While trying to leave the city, Brian notices agents blocking the area. He decides to hide his motorcycle to investigate unnoticed. He eventually reaches the place where the meteor fragments are being collected and overhears a conversation revealing the truth about the creature. During the discussion, Megdos explains that the organism underwent a mutation and became a life form capable of growing and hunting human beings. Another scientist expresses concern about the absurd speed of this growth. He warns that the threat could spiral completely out of control. Despite this, the Colonel views the situation as a strategic opportunity, while Meadows insists that everything can still be controlled if they manage to contain the creature before it spreads even further. He also makes it clear that nobody will be allowed to leave the town, keeping the population isolated under the excuse of a medical quarantine. Shortly afterward, the team discovers that the creature is in the sewers, along with several survivors. Meadows orders the creature to be recovered at any cost, even if civilians must be sacrificed. Upon hearing this, Brian tries to act, but ends up discovered after attacking an armed agent. He flees through the woods while being chased and shot at by the operations men. He manages to escape into a sewer after losing them near a bridge. Meanwhile, Meadows discovers they can trap the creature by closing the valves of the aqueduct system. Inside the tunnels, Meg tries to escape with Kevin and Eddie, but the creature reappears and captures Eddie during the escape. Kevin manages to cross to the other side, while Meg becomes trapped and tells her brother to continue alone. The agents appear and distract the organism for a few moments, allowing her to continue fleeing through the tunnels. Brian arrives on his motorcycle and rescues her, and the two escape, but they end up crashing the motorcycle and continue on foot. Along the way, they encounter a terrified scientist, and Brian pressures him for an escape route, but Meg prevents the situation from spiraling out of control. After escaping through the tunnels, Meg, Brian, and the scientist find a sewer exit, but they end up surrounded by Meadows' men, and he orders the manhole sealed, even knowing the creature will kill them. As everyone panics, Brian grabs a weapon and causes an explosion to clear a path, allowing them to escape. Outside, soldiers surround the group and Brian tries to reveal that the entire operation is based on lies, while Meadows orders them to shoot him, and Briggs begins suspecting the truth and refuses to obey. Before the confrontation can continue, the creature suddenly appears and drags Meadows into the sewer, killing him. With the situation out of control, the Colonel orders the organism attacked with explosives, but this only enrages it further. The creature reappears gigantic in the middle of the town and begins devouring everything around it. During the chaos, Meg becomes separated from Brian, while the soldiers attempt to use fire against the monster unsuccessfully. Reverend Mark nearly dies after being hit by flames, but Meg manages to save him using a fire extinguisher. She tries to push the organism back while they flee, but the extinguisher runs out and they become trapped. While the creature continues destroying the town, Brian appears driving a snowplow truck in an attempt to stop it. He sprays snow onto the organism but realizes it will not be enough. He decides to launch the vehicle directly into the creature, causing it to overturn in the process. Meg runs to help him and finds weapons and explosives left behind by dead soldiers. She then lures the creature into an ice storage facility and activates a bomb to freeze the organism. But she ends up trapping her leg during the escape. At the last moment, Brian manages to save her before the explosion completely freezes the creature. After surviving, the two believe they have finally defeated the monster. However, the fragment kept by the Reverend is shown growing once again, indicating that the threat is still alive.